In episode 9, Luke and June go meet with Mark, and he gives them the update. They found Hannah. She's in a wife school in Colorado Springs. It's an old Air Force base that's been turned into a school, and she's doing fine. But that night, they're going in. Their intel has suggested they have a small window to fly under Gilead's radar and pick up 30 girls that were stolen from their parents, Hannah being one of them. And so far, Hannah's fine. She still goes by Agnes, but she also remembers her real name, Hannah. She even writes it on a couple of pieces of paper. So she's very aware of the fact that she was stolen from Luke and June. What she's unaware of is that night she's going to be taken back to Canada. Luke and June are able to meet the commander that is in charge. He's very aware of their situation. And when June tries to explain that the girls are going to be scared, he says, "No, I fully understand. I have a daughter of my own, and my goal is to bring your daughter back and get back to my daughter here in Toronto." The conversation with Mark and the conversation with the soldier give June and Luke a lot of faith. But when Mark tells him that he'll be watching the mission from the consulate that night, June is insistent that she watch along. Mark kind of pushes back, but June tells him, well, not everybody gave the intel that got you to this point. And Mark has to admit that she's right. So that night, Luke and June head to the consulate to watch the mission live, seeing the progress. And everything's going normal until all of a sudden it doesn't. All 3 planes on the radar just disappear. Luke and June are ushered out of the room, and a little while later, Mark comes up and tells them that everybody's dead. All the girls are alive, but that's because the planes never reached the girls. Gilead had gotten word of their mission and moved their anti-aircraft missiles over to the border, so as soon as the planes flew over, they got shot down right away. Mark looks visibly shook, and he now has to go tell all the other parents that their children are not coming home because the mission failed. Now, that same day, over in Gilead, the guy running things, Lawrence, has had quite a busy day. It started off with a meeting of Mrs. Putnam and Aunt Lydia. Like any single woman in Gilead, Mrs. Putnam's a little concerned that she's going to be sent to the colonies, but Aunt Lydia and Commander Lawrence assure her that won't be the case. The reason she was brought there is because Commander Lawrence wants to propose. He tells her that her and the baby can move in and live in the house. It's an arrangement that kind of works for both sides. Lawrence has been getting a lot of crap for not remarrying, and Mrs. Putnam is now a single mother in Gilead. Wasn't exactly what Naomi Putnam had in mind. She doesn't really want to shack up with the guy who was in charge of murdering her husband, even though her husband totally deserved it. But Lawrence tells her it's a suggestion, think about it. The next day, he makes a phone call to June. He knew all about the American mission. In fact, he was the one that was in charge of putting the anti-aircraft missiles where they were. So he calls June to revisit his offer. June, however, is livid because Lawrence knows about her situation. Lawrence knows that the girls that the Americans were after were girls that were stolen from their families, like Hannah. Yet, he still thwarted the mission and didn't allow it. June really thought Lawrence was different, but the way that Lawrence was looking at it, he was protecting his country. So his offer for New Bethlehem still stands. And he's not doing it out of the goodness of his heart. He's doing it because June Osborne is a symbol. He tells her that if she wants to come to New Bethlehem, she's going to have to go public, saying that the American mission was a failure and it was stupid. And June is not going to do that. She's not going to make Gilead look like the victim. When she calls Gilead an evil country, Lawrence reminds her that he's trying to fix that. He even dangles Nick out there, saying that they can live together, they can borrow sugar from one another if they want to, because he's heading to New Bethlehem. But June is too pissed off. She even goes so far as to say how much Lawrence's wife hated him, hated what he did to the country, hated that he was the architect of Gilead. Comments that really do hurt Lawrence. In the end, he tells her that the idea of him just giving up Hannah to go to Canada and live with June and Luke is never going to happen. The offer is she come back to Gilead and see her daughter, or she never sees her daughter at all. June slams the phone and starts going into a rage. When she finally calms down, she goes and meets with Mark, who admits that they shouldn't have trusted the sources they did. And June's comment to that is, Gilead's always been one step ahead. But after the conversation that she had earlier in the day with Lawrence, she's done with Lawrence. There's no wavering on if she'll go to New Bethlehem or not. She is full-blown American support now. And when she asks Mark, all right, what's next? His idea is Nick. He tells her how he approached Nick when he was in Gilead about switching sides, and he wasn't open to the idea then, but maybe a conversation with June could sway him. He also tells her that the look of a guy like Nick defecting from Gilead would make a big impact, but June can make a big impact as well. after everything she's done. If she just stepped up, she could really put her power to use. But June tells him, I just don't feel comfortable doing that right now. She does, however, tell Mark, set up a meeting. And the next day, June heads and meets with Nick in an undisclosed location, and she starts screaming at him because he didn't take Mark up on his offer. She then starts pitching Nick on the idea of defecting, coming over, being with her, being with Nicole. But Nick tells her, no, I can't. I have a wife now. I have Rose. Gilead's her home. Her father's high up. She's not going to want to come with. June then starts bringing up what he plans on doing when they put a handmaid in the house, and Nick tells her Rose is pregnant. June then realizes this whole conversation is futile. He kind of gives June the same speech that Lawrence gave her, how Gilead's changing and they're making it better. In the end, though, they have to say their goodbyes. They both know that it's going to be really hard for them to see one another again. They tell each other that they love each other, and then they go their separate ways. June then heads back to Toronto, where that night there is a candlelight vigil for all of the soldiers who died in the extraction mission. As Mark reads off the names, he's kind of being drowned out by a lot of protesters. Even with people screaming at them to, quote, go home, most of the refugees are simply drowning it out. Eventually, the daughter of the one commander, the guy that was leading the mission, the guy that Luke and June met, she steps up. She can't be any older than 5. And she starts doing the Pledge of Allegiance, but she forgets the words. So June decides to step up and help her. And they get through the entire Pledge of Allegiance, and then gunshots ring out. June instinctively hops on top of the girl to protect her, as most people just run for their lives. And maybe this gunman was sent by someone from Gilead. Because after Nick left June, he headed back to Gilead, and he had a meeting that night with the commanders. While he was meeting with the commanders, Rose was meeting with the other wives, and they were all fawning over the fact that she's pregnant. But in the next room, the commanders discuss what's next for Gilead. They revel in their victory, the fact that the Americans lost in their extraction mission, and they talk about how they've gained even more support from other countries. But then one of the commanders mentions how June is still stirring up trouble, and it's about time they, quote, take care of her. Lawrence just stops dead in his tracks and says, well, it's certainly worth considering. He doesn't really want to show them his hand. All the commanders then walk out of the room, and they congratulate Lawrence because Mrs. Putnam has decided to take him up on his offer, and the two are going to be married. A marriage that will most certainly be an absolute sham. Over with Naomi's former friend, Serena, she's not doing well. Her relationship with Alanis is rough, to say the least. Alanis scheduled a photo shoot with Serena and Noah, and this is all for the new fertility center, which is set to open in a couple of days. Serena even asks Alanis if she can go and be there with Noah, but Alanis shoots it down right away, telling Serena that nobody cares that she's going to be there. It's all about Noah. Noah's the star attraction. Serena tries to stick up for herself by reminding Alanis that the commander sent her there to kind of be a figurehead, but Alanis tells her, my husband doesn't answer to those commanders. She then starts telling Serena that she needs to start pumping more so that they can bottle feed Noah. And Serena points out that it won't be that confusing if she just nurses Noah, but Alanis says, well, my smart boy won't be confused. And that really pisses off Serena. She almost says something to Alanis. She gets close, but she doesn't. She holds her tongue. The fact, though, that this woman is taking credit for her baby really annoys her. With Alanis, though, shooting down the idea of Serena heading to the fertility center for the opening, Serena decides a different approach. She goes and talks to Ryan. She makes her pitch. It's one that Ryan is open to, and eventually he actually agrees to it. The next day, the center is set to open, and Serena gets ready to go, and Alanis is furious. She yells at Serena for going behind her back after she said no and convincing Ryan to let her go ahead. She even goes so far as to slap the shit out of Serena. She asks Serena, who the hell do you think you are? And when Serena says, I'm Mrs. Frederick Waterford, Alanis says, no, to me, you are just a whore. She then tells Serena to get in the car, and the two women head off to the center, where they have to play nice. They're in front of a bunch of donors, a bunch of people, and they're in front of Ryan, who likely had no idea about the interaction. Serena is great. She's holding court with Noah, but eventually Alanis pulls her aside and tells her it's time to go home, reminding her that people aren't there to see her, they're there to see Noah. Right before she leaves, though, she asks to feed Noah, and Alanis gets pissed off that Serena didn't prepare a bottle, but she has no choice. Serena, along with the maid that works in the Wheeler household, heads to the very back of the building so that Serena can feed her child. She asks the woman for some privacy, and it looks like the woman knows exactly what's going to happen once she leaves, but she agrees to it, leaving Serena alone. And as soon as she is alone, she runs out of the back of that building with her child, almost getting hit by a car, but finding one girl that is willing to let her get in, driving off, and escaping. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.